Welcome to Cultural Conversations. It is 6:30 and we're going to go ahead and get started. Thank you very much for being here. My name is Carol Ross, and I'd love to welcome you to the annual evening of Cultural Conversations, More Stories from the Heart. Tonight's program is a reflection of 2020, a defining moment in history and our hopes for 2021. This is a story that we all share. While in the midst of great challenge and sorrow, including the devastating events over the past week, we continue to witness the efforts, large and small, to support family, friends, and neighbors and the larger community. Before we get started with our program and introduce our guests, I'd like to acknowledge the land we are on. Next. We acknowledge this land as the ancestral homelands of the Coast Salish people, the traditional home of all tribes and bands within the Duwamish and Snoqualmie Indian tribe. We take this opportunity to honor and express our deepest respect to the original caretakers of this land, a people that are still here, continuing to honor their heritage. So right now, we're just going to do a very quick Zoom orientation. I know a lot of people have been on this platform for a while, but I don't want to make any assumptions. So if you can remain on mute, if you're not a speaker, there will be plenty of opportunity at the end of the program where you'll have an opportunity to engage in small group conversation. If you have a video camera, we'd love to have you turn it on and name yourself. That creates a much friendlier space for engaging with the screen and when eventually we are together in the Zoom rooms. Okay, we can see the number of people that are here with the meeting participants. We'll go next to the chat function. So you'll see that the window is open for chat. And I want to encourage you during this program to think about using the chat more so at the end of the program, where you'll have an opportunity to share your impressions of the evening and get to know each other better. This way we can keep our storytellers on track. But if you need to put something in the chat, that would be okay. But if we can keep that to a minimum. Next. You can change your window size and by moving the bar horizontally to the left. And I encourage you to be in speaker view. That way you'll have a great opportunity to connect with the speaker and be focused on truly what they are saying. And finally, yes, we are using closed captioning. So you should see that option. You should see the subtitles that are coming across your screen. And if you click on the live transcript button, I believe you can change the size of the font if it's too small for you. With that, I'd like to introduce Mark Heilman. Next slide, please. Mark, who will be introducing some special guests. Thank you, Mark.
Yeah, thank you, Carol. Well, I do want to say first off, just our profound gratitude to Carol and to Debbie Lacey, who put profound work into this evening. It's through both of their expertise, which is profound, but also their heart. Throughout the year, they are watching and listening through their relationships who would be great storytellers to share with our community. So both Carol and Debbie, we thank you so much for your work and the impact that you have had through this program and through many other ways throughout our community. So Carol Ross and Debbie Lacey, thank you both very, very much. We are also grateful this evening for our council, City Council, who supports this and many other programs that support and attend programs that really help with the resiliency of our community, help to prepare us for times that we cannot foresee. So we have our SVP this evening, and I'm sorry I can't see who all is on, but may join us along the way. Mayor Lyd Robinson, Council Member Conrad Lee is with us, Council Member John Stokes, and then Council Member Janice Zahn. And then Dr. Francine Wiest from Bellevue School District Board is with us as well. So very grateful for what each of them do and for what our council has done through this past year of providing direction, providing stability, working with the community, and continuing to listen and hear two-way conversations about what is important to our community. But throughout the years, and even during these most important last few days and week, provide proclamation and leadership to address very troubling things in our community and in our world, and provide leadership proclaiming that we do stand with our Asian community. We stand against hate. We stand for genuine community and understanding. And that's part of what Cultural Conversations is to expose us to individuals, expose us to cultures, but honestly, what it most provides is a strengthened community. So thank each of you council members for being with us this evening, your leadership, and community, thank you for being with us as well, for learning. And we're very grateful for our storytellers this evening as well. So I'm going to turn to Council Member Zahn, who's going to provide our welcome. So Janice Zahn, welcome. We're glad to have you with us.
Yeah, well, I am honored to be here and speak on behalf of the City Council, which I will just tell you, all of us want to welcome you and say a few words. So I'm honored to be able to do that. You know, and I would say that it's especially meaningful this month because of all of the things that have been happening in our community with our Asian community, and it's Women's History Month as well. So when I think about the kind of things that have been happening, it's important for us to spend this time together and lift up our stories. You know, I was thinking about the fact that, as Mark talked about, it's these kinds of events that builds those bridges to understanding and connection and that sense of belonging, so that we can unite together and stand up for each other when we see injustices against any of us. And I think it's also important that we celebrate our stories and our culture and our contributions and our identity. And, you know, this is actually also a special month because it is also Cesar Chavez Day on the 31st. And as we've seen with COVID-19, those that grow our food are really so important. And I know that one of the speakers is going to be talking about their Mexican heritage and their journey. And I think it's actually really important that we lift up those in our community that are doing so much, including, right, Cesar Chavez and Dolores Corte, who worked on developing the United Farm Workers. And, you know, because I think too many times we can, when things happen in our community, focus on all of the hate and the negative energy. And yet I think it's in these moments that we can lift up all of the contributions and the amazing things that are happening in our community. And it's just exciting to be here with all of you and to listen to the stories. So thank you very much for being here.
Thank you, Council Member Zahn. Back to you, Carol.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. You know, it's been over 1 year since we last met in person. Next slide, please. We have continued with virtual programs to stay connected to women in the community who continue to share and inspire how they have been creative and resilient during COVID. Tonight, over the next hour, we'll hear 3 different stories from the community, those who work, live, and visit Bellevue. Then you'll have an opportunity to share in small group conversations for about 30 minutes. My hope is that you will connect to the stories that will be shared and more deeply with your own. It's also my hope that you will listen closely and perhaps develop greater compassion for people that you may meet along the way, and open to create more of a sense of belonging for yourself and others. Tell me, or maybe you'll tell me later, what is your story from the heart? So in this particular space, we have some conversation agreements. Let's commit to a safe space for connection and conversation. Let's be present for each share. Let's try not to multitask while we're in this forum. Respect those brave enough to tell their story. Understand that a single person does not speak for everyone who looks like them. Let's be sensitive to topics or stories that should stay in the room, and let's share what is good. Next slide, please. It is my great pleasure to introduce Debbie Lacey, Executive Director of Eastside for All and founding member of ERIC, Eastside Refugee and Immigrant Center. Debbie has been a friend to Cultural Conversations for so many years and has guided this program in helping many to tell their stories. Please welcome Debbie Lacey.
Hi, thank you so much, Carol, and good evening. Hello, everyone. As we introduce tonight's storytellers, I invite you to keep in mind that their stories are their own, born from their unique experiences, identities, and opinions. They're here to bravely share, and you've come to listen and perhaps to learn what it's like to be here in this community, looking through someone else's eyes and understanding a bit about what's in their heart. Sometimes when we listen, even if we intend to be open-minded, we may have a tendency to mentally object, judge, or question when a story's words don't line up in some way with what we know to be true for ourselves. Let's suspend that tendency as you hear tonight's stories. Let's honor the stories as they are, knowing we need not be persuaded to change our minds or our actions unless we're so moved. Piper Anderson is a writer and artist who did a TED Talk called "Can Stories Create Justice?" In that talk, she said, "Hearing a story is an opportunity for you, the listener, to show up more fully in your humanity, because what you do with it makes you an agent of change." You may want to keep a notepad handy if you have one nearby. We're missing our fully interactive experience here, so we're going to build in some things virtually when our speakers conclude their stories. If you have your camera on with your mic still muted, you can clap, you can wave, you can give a couple of snaps or rub your hands together. That one comes from Delbert Richardson from Unspoken Truths. And he taught me that when we do this in a space like this, we're saying we appreciate the energy that we've taken in, and we're now giving back that appreciation and energy and positivity. So let's begin. As part of the annual Welcoming Week celebration that takes place in our community, the City of Bellevue has been doing a My Story virtual exhibit featuring stories from the city staff about the immigrant and migrant journeys that brought them to Bellevue. Our first storyteller is one of the contributors to that exhibit. Please join me in welcoming Arthur Sepulveda.
Good evening. My name is Arthur Sepulveda. I am an assistant prosecuting attorney for the City of Bellevue. I work in the City Attorney's Office, and I believe Yuriana is going to play a video that we created for this year's Storytelling Week. And then afterwards, Debbie and I are going to have an interview. So I hope you guys enjoy the video that was produced.
Hello, my name is Arthur Sepulveda. I work for the Office of City Attorney as an assistant prosecuting attorney. We did not cross the border crossed us. My maternal great-grandmother used to say this to her family all the time. In the past, my family would live and travel between Mexico and the United States on a regular basis in order to find work and make a home. Sometimes economics drove the moves, and sometimes it was the politics of the day. It took a toll on how we sought to build our lives. Family lived in Mexico to take care of extended family members and worked in the U.S. to make a living. Some of these family members were born and raised in the U.S., then repatriated back to Mexico, even though they were U.S. citizens. As migrant farm workers, going to farmlands that could offer the best wage for back-breaking work, our family would live in Mexico, Arizona, California, and even Washington. Education was important, but many times it was not a choice for the children, since they were needed to help support the family. As an example, my grandmother left school after 6th grade to help raise her siblings and eventually became a nanny and a cook. She was such an excellent cook that she was offered a job to be chef to President Gerald Ford at Rancho Mirage in California. It wasn't until my tias, tios, and grandmother convinced my grandfather to settle in one place that the children could attend school and our way of life as migrant farm workers changed. I was born in Indio, California. When I was 4 years old, my father found a job in Seattle and our family moved away from the Southwest and Mexico to live in Washington State. My parents, sister, and I settled in Linwood, and we have been there ever since. My sister and I are locally grown. We have our degrees from the University of Washington, and I finished law school at Seattle University. Upon passing the bar, I accepted my current position with the city as a deputy prosecuting attorney for Bellevue. I have never had to experience repatriation, travel between Mexico and the US to make a living, be a migrant farm worker, or face the struggle to find good education. But I come from people who sacrificed so I could have the choices and numerous opportunities. My family's stories are about immigration, hard and laborious farm work, and the fortitude it takes to become an American. It was not an easy nor lighthearted journey, but one that makes me immensely proud.
Thank you. Yes, and we can show Arthur some gratitude for his video story. And we're really glad that you're here with us, Arthur, to share a little bit more. Can you tell us what brought you to share your story in that way with the community?
Well, first off, thanks for having me tonight. I appreciate being able to share my story in this forum. But the reason I decided to share my story when asked if I would be willing to, I think it's important that since I'm a public servant, that the people in the community, the citizens of Bellevue, and visitors that visit the city know who their servants are, the people that are serving them and working for them at City Hall. I think another important reason that I decided to share my story is because it's an American experience. I don't know if people have seen the PBS series that is out there, but they show every so often they have a series, and sometimes it's about presidents, sometimes it's about various groups of people and their American experience. And I think it's important that American experiences are shared, especially in a time like today where so much hate and division. And it is part of our country's history. And sometimes part of our country's history is overlooked. One being that during the Great Depression, a lot of U.S. citizens were repatriated back to Mexico. A lot of people don't know that, and that's a famous saying. The border didn't cross us, or we didn't. Yeah, we didn't cross the border crossed us. And the reason for that is that dates back to the U.S.-Mexican War, when those states in the Southwest, essentially the U.S. Engaged in a war with Mexico, and at the end of that war, those states were then sold to the U.S. And so a lot of people were either repatriated back to Mexico or stayed and got U.S. citizenship. But during the Great Depression, a lot of people were sent back to Mexico, even though they had no connection to family there. And that was part of my maternal grandmother's family's experience. I also think that it's important to share my story and to share this kind of story because the previous administration has spewed a lot of stereotypes and dishonest things about Mexican Americans, about immigrants in general. And so this is a way to show that we are not all criminals and rapists. In fact, most immigrants that come to this country are not. Most are here for the same reason that everyone has ever come to this continent, and that is to seek a better life for their families, to create a dream for them. And we're all looking to chase the American dream. And I just want to show that there are people that come here and have been of service to this country.
Thank you, Arthur. You know, I know that you have a really personal, several personal reasons for why you chose to become an attorney, and that is part of your story as well. Would you mind sharing a little bit about that, your decision to become an attorney? What brought that about?
Yeah, one of the first big interactions I ever saw with a law or the criminal justice system outside of what you see on TV. I had a cousin who unfortunately was charged with the crime, and I just happened to be visiting California at the time. And I remember going to the court proceeding and not understanding what was going on, seeing my family members not knowing what was going on. Having an attorney, I don't know if he was any good or not, but just the fact that he wasn't truly explaining to us what was going on. The criminal justice system or law itself, if you want to take it down to its basic form, is essentially a game with a bunch of rules, and the people who know the rules to the game and know how to navigate that system are the ones who are going to be successful in it. And I thought in that moment, a seed was planted in my mind that law was an avenue to change how my community members and my family interact in this society, the way to uplift my community. Another reason I specifically went into prosecution was when I was in the transition from going to undergrad to law school. My cousin was brutally murdered, and through that experience, one reason I'm a prosecutor is because I want to serve victims like her, victims of the community. I think, to be frank, if you think of a prosecutor, I'm probably not the person that comes to your mind. I think what we see on TV and what we normally think of prosecutors is the white male, the tall white male, and I think the fact that I can speak Spanish, the fact that I look like members of my community, and when they see me in court, and if they're victims, or even if they're defendants, I think it brings a sense that they're willing to be willing to cooperate and be comforted that there's someone that looks like them in the courtroom.
Thank you, Arthur. Clearly a lot of passion in your own life, and as you were growing up, what you saw and heard, and then going back generations, your family's history. Thank you so much for sharing, for being here. Please again, take a moment, everyone, to reflect a bit for Arthur. If you've noted anything that resonates with you, we so appreciate you being here. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me. You guys have a wonderful evening.
Thank you. Well, at this time, it's my great honor to introduce our next storyteller, Emily. Emily is a senior at Interlake High School. She identifies as Chinese and Taiwanese American. She's also serving as an intern with the City of Bellevue's Diversity Advantage team. Please join me in welcoming Emily.
Hi, thanks, Debbie. So I'll get started with my story. I'm really glad to be here. So growing up as an Asian American, I always felt like this massive burden, like an ever-present pressure to succeed academically. My peers all seemed to be infinitely smarter than me. My immigrant parents were continuously reminding me that academic achievement was tantamount to being like a respected person as a person of color, and to tantamount to forging a path to success in the US. And regarding activism, my mother always thought it was wasteful and dangerous, that it was better to be safe at home than outspoken in the streets for a controversial cause. And since my mom was the child of an official in the Communist Party of China, she'd always had the privilege to choose in action, to choose safety and security, since the issues involved didn't affect her livelihood directly. And that was something that I didn't pick up on until recently. So this kind of upbringing that I had was basically the start to how my identity was externally shaped as a so-called model minority. So according to Learning for Justice, the model minority myth perpetuates a narrative in which Asian American children are whiz kids or musical geniuses. And within this myth, There's tiger moms who force children to work harder and be better than everyone else, while nerdy, effeminate dads hold prestigious but not quite leadership positions in STEM industries like medicine and accounting. This myth also characterizes Asian Americans as just generally a polite, law-abiding group who have achieved a higher level of success than the general population through some combination of innate talent and pull yourselves up by the bootstraps immigrant striving. So does this sound familiar to you? And back to my dad. So he thought sports to also be wasteful and dangerous, having been injured decades ago as a pole vaulter. So I vividly remember being 12 years old and bumbling through my first ever online Pilates workout. Kudos to you if you know who Blog Pilates is. And while I was doing this, he shook his head, saying that I should be studying because that's where I was going to make money later on. And besides that, I was built to have a plumper figure than most other kids. So although I realize my parents' belief in these sorts of fixed circumstances like these limited circumstances can somewhat be true, I gradually recognized the shortcomings of their argument as I decided to continue pursuing online fitness and ended up joining cross country and befriending teammates on there. So in my freshman and sophomore year, especially when I encountered perceived failure in races that didn't go too well, I deflected the cause to circumstances that I couldn't change about myself, like luck, like talent, just what my body was capable of innately, rather than taking responsibility for habits that I could impact, like showing up to practice every day or like choosing to do like an extra loop. So I realized that my final results were much less from my fixed abilities, but rather from the developed practice skills that I gained and asking myself and always being sure to reflect what I was capable of improving. So along with a growth mindset, cross country helped me understand the importance of inclusivity. So as someone who was in the gifted program for several years, I got to meet people who fell outside of this bubble and people who weren't like the usual stereotype that I'd grown accustomed to making friends with. So I'm actually third from left here, and the person to the right of me is one of the half Asian pair of twins on the team who introduced me to political advocacy. And this looked like delivering campaign materials to doorsteps, joining clubs like the Green Team, or going out and marching for causes they cared about. And with their insight, I began to view new concepts with curiosity instead of distrust, by doing my research instead of shying away. So come May 2020, with the murder of George Floyd by Minneapolis police, this same pair of twins encouraged me to march for Black Lives with them. At first, I was pretty uncertain because of COVID and because I felt a sense of peer pressure because some of my other friends that I spoke to refused to leave their houses because they feared violence. But I realized as a person who had rarely ventured out into the world to actively shout out for what I cared about, I began to wonder if this was sort of a now or never moment for me. And after reflecting, I realized that going out in solidarity was going to be the right thing to do for me personally. It's what I felt just an obligation and urge to do, even if it was riskier. And we were all obviously worried about COVID, so when we went out to march, we made sure to socially distance as best as we could and go in the most protective PPE. So after going to a few local protests in Bellevue, which were all nonviolent, I contemplated going to the Black Lives Matter Seattle King County Silent March. And this time, I was the one who found it, who spread the news about it online, and who invited the twins to come with me. So leading up to this, I gradually come to realize that being silent about these kinds of issues as an Asian American was a way of being complicit to white supremacy. But ironically, I realized that actions can sometimes speak louder than words. And as you can tell, like with the umbrellas, that was a rainy day, and I just remember shivering like throughout the entire event. And as the march began, I was just one in a crowd on like a huge grassy field. So the rain that happened, it began as a super light drizzle, but it heightened into this crazy downpour, and it soaked through our masks and it numbed our feet as we all marched through neighborhoods and traffic on our way to Jefferson Park. And what made it really chaotic was that sometimes an array of newcomers who didn't realize that it was a silent march would begin sporadically chanting towards the overcast sky as we were all shivering. So, but the silence for the most part not only spoke volumes for Black Lives Matter Seattle King County's demands, but also our progression to Jefferson Park itself, which was very slow, very gradual, and always perpetuated by uncertain pauses. This mirrors the draining ordeal of fighting for racial justice against systemically ingrained anti-Black racism. So my experience definitely seemed to resonate with the message that success isn't going to be immediate and growth is not linear, which ties back into what I learned from cross country, and that racism and other forms of bigotry are not something that we can immediately get rid of, but it's something that we can all be a part of recognizing and undoing. So from those few months onward, I realized that I was so much more than just a statistic, and I was more than what people might see me as at first glance. As an Asian American, they might think that I'm STEM-oriented, reserved, like a sort of China doll, if you will. And I realized that I was so much more than the box people put me in as a perceived model minority. I was someone who took interest in the perspectives of those around me and someone determined to bring about change. And you may have noticed the question mark next to activist, student activist in my title and wondered about it. And to be brutally honest, I think the term activism it's definitely a label that I continually question as to whether I ascribe it to myself, because I think there's so much more that I still could be doing. So I still haven't fully claimed this label. But the important thing is that I'm committed to activism and that this incentive carries me through like any self-doubt I might have and helps motivate me on my journey and helps me prevent like burning out. So I encourage everyone here to keep that in mind, that it's never going to be like perfect the first time around. So, and now I'd like to address like the recent upsurge in attacks on Asian elders, like including the deaths of 6 working class Asian women at a couple Atlanta massage parlors last week with the rise of COVID-19. So all these events have made me realize that even more how this model minority myth has dangerously divided Asians and other people of color, and how this leads to an increasing widespread tolerance of anti-Black racism and also racial microaggressions against Black and Asian people and people of color in general. And these microaggressions can include like saying the N-word as a non-Black person, or like seeing someone who's Asian and asking them to help you with their math or science homework because you assume that they're good at it because they're Asian, or saying something that is racist, but claiming that you're not racist because you have friends who are people of color, family who are people of color. And personally, I've had some white friends at a summer camp just tell me about how Asians at their school are so stressed from academic pressure that they have just collectively succumbed to drugs and alcohol, which was a huge generalization. And it made me like uncomfortable because it didn't seem, at first listen, it didn't seem like it was an offensive thing to say, but it made me think. And these kinds of generalizations and assumptions we might make about people of color, like grouping them into a sort of monolith, it might seem harmless, but it actually is contributing to all the damaging stereotypes that is leading to all these like racist hate crimes to happen. So I've also come to realize how harmful it is to just view East Asians as having a greater proximity to whiteness, and this can include how we're seen as like lighter skinned and viewed as more mild-mannered and not prone to violence, unlike other groups of POC. And this is dangerous because it completely overlooks the racism, socioeconomic hardship, and violence faced by all groups within the Asian community. And so to bridge it back to Black Lives Matter, I've come to realize that this model minority, it also invalidates Black struggles by suggesting that Black people don't work hard enough. But in truth, for all Black and Indigenous people of color, there's always going to be more obstacles and more pressure to work harder in pursuit of prosperity. And in these past couple weeks, as I've read the stories of countless elders slammed into the ground across the country, elders who look like my grandparents, as I've reached out to a friend whose Japanese teacher was violently assaulted in the same Chinatown streets that I walked through just a month ago, I wonder if any day the person lying on the ground could be my parents, if it could be my brother or me or my friends. Like, it's something that I have to keep thinking about, and it weighs on me. So right now and more than ever, solidarity needs to happen. Solidarity needs to happen among Black and Indigenous people of color, and instead of the hostility and divisiveness that we've seen from our fear. So, and rather than treating it like a race, rather than running past each other, trying to outrun one group in a pursuit of assimilation, I think we should all be running together towards a time of solidarity and justice. Thank you.
Wow. Thank you so much, Emily. I just want to invite all of us to take a moment of breath to reflect on what Emily has named here in the space for us. So we're just going to have a pause. Emily, thank you so much for being here, for sharing your story, and for what you do for the city of Bellevue and your intern role. Thank you.
Thanks, Debbie. It's great to be here, and I'm really thankful that I was able to share my story.
Absolutely. Well, we have more for you this evening, folks. I would like to now introduce a story montage for you from We Are Pistachio, a global community of women sharing their personal narratives about what it's like to live abroad and their search for inclusion and belonging. Let's welcome Aditi, Narcissa, and Anka.
Thank you so much, Debbie. Really excited to be here. Just sharing my screen, so give me one moment. All right. So hello, everyone. My name is Aditi, and I'm here to share my story through the familiar story of the ugly duckling. However, this is the true story of the ugly duckling published by me. I invite you to immerse yourself in the images and the words. It was a cold, dreary winter's day. 5 snuggled eggs ached for the sun's ray. Mother duck felt a niggle, a shove, and then many a wriggle. Slivers of cracks formed over the eggs, and finally, out came a head. One by one, out popped 3 more. Mother duck looked aglow. Yellow heads bobbing up and down. Where was the 5th? Mother duck frowned. As they all looked around, the eggs started bouncing about. With a skip, a thud, a thump, a gray scruffy head broke free. Shaking off her feathers clumsily, she seemed to say, "I've arrived, you see." The blob of gray stood stark against the yellow sunshine duck's dark. "You are different, not like us. Go away, don't make a fuss." "Me different? I'm just like you. I'm yellow and beautiful too." The river beckoned to quench her thirst, and as she saw her reflection, she felt she would burst. "I'm ugly, you're right. I'm gray and you're so bright. I don't deserve to be with you. You would be happier without me too." The yellow blobs went far away till she could see them no more. And then she knew she was alone, no one to hear her cry or moan. "I'm ugly, I don't deserve love." She would tell herself each day, even if the birds smiled at her, she would send them away. Days went by, then months flew. The world stopped smiling at her too. Standing at the edge of the pond, she didn't know what lay beyond. A stormy breeze took her by surprise. She looked up with damp eyes. Thunder and lightning parted the sky, and out boomed a voice far up high. You are my child like everyone else, and you deserve love like the rest. Where does beauty lie? Ask the wise, and you will know you're a blessing in disguise. But I'm ugly, she said. I'm gray and scruffy with a bald head. Learn to love yourself, my child. Look beyond your gray-colored hide. Uncover the beauty, love, and light that lies somewhere lost out of sight. But nobody likes me, she said. Neither the trees nor the riverbed. The trees, the animals, the deep blue sky. No one wants to look me in the eye. First, my child, be brave and strong. At your reflection, take a hard look long. Deeply marvel at my glory. As you were born, so was a new story. Proclaim to yourself, I love you, beautiful. Proclaim to yourself, I love you, you are the best. And slowly watch as magic flows, and so does all the rest. As suddenly as the storm had come, a calm descended around. As she looked up in the sky, what a beautiful rainbow up high. Her reflection no longer bothered her, neither did her gray-colored wings, and as she looked at herself in the mirror, so did the world at her sing. Seasons went by and she flourished, not a day went by without gratitude for having heard the voice from above, the one that taught her self-love. And like every morning, one day she stood to greet her reflection in the river by the wood, and lo, behold, when she saw her face, she was pristine, a picture of grace. The voice boomed once again from above. You looked beyond your gray hide. You uncovered the beauty inside. Thank you, she said, with tears in her eyes. Thank you for being my blessing in disguise. Have you ever felt like the ugly duckling? I invite you to think of a time where you felt like you didn't belong. Narcissa, how about you? Did you ever feel that way?
Yes, there was a time when I felt like I did not belong, but I did not let that discourage me. I believe that everyone should find their own way on how to adapt and feel included in the new community. This is a long process, and I had to do it twice over. My name is Narcissa Kaminsky, and through my life, I have had to move several times. I want to talk about two very different types of moves in my life. In 1992, I did not have a choice when I moved from Sarajevo, Bosnia, to Germany. It was in the middle of the Bosnian War. It was a difficult move to leave the country you love, all your family, your job, your home, and suddenly you're in the new world, new language, new culture. Flowers smell different. Food tastes different. People are different. I would wake up in the middle of the night and dream of being home, going back to see the family, going back to work. Dream, sweet dream. The world just got worse and worse. I started feeling lonelier and lonelier. It was time to do something. I decided to upskill. I went into school to learn the German language. I found a job, made a lot of friends, and started a new life. I continued to live in Germany for 20 years, found my love, got married, and became a mother of two beautiful daughters. In 2010, my husband had the opportunity for a new job position in Seattle. This was a very different move. We decided to move to Seattle for a new challenge, my husband's career, and also great opportunity for our daughters. Again, new world, new language, new culture. What I love about Seattle is diversity, belonging to each other. You never, ever feel like you're a stranger. Everyone speaks with an accent. Everyone tries to help you and include you in their world. After I moved to Seattle, I started volunteering at Creekside Elementary. What a wonderful opportunity to make friends, to learn about school system, to discover the new culture and learn how to feel included into the new community. I can definitely confirm the best way to feel included in community is by volunteering. In 2014, I was thinking of the next steps. It was time to do something for myself and think about my career. Moving to another country is a big change, and making a new community a home is a huge challenge. I fell in love helping other people find a new community, and I decided to do this as my job. Today, as a broker and relocation specialist, I'm able to help people from all over the globe find a new home, find a school for their children, and include them in their new community. This is something I truly enjoy. This is not only a job for me, but also an opportunity to make new friends, to learn about their culture and hearing about other relocation stories. Everything is about these communities and the way in which we are able to help each other. One for all for one. How about you, Anka? Do you feel included in your community?
Hello, my name is Anka. And yes, today I feel included in my community. However, that wasn't always the case. Can you imagine moving to a different continent just before the pandemic? That's my story. A year ago, I was at the crossroads. I had two options. One, I could join my boyfriend on a 2-year adventure in the US. Or two, I could continue on my current path of living in the Netherlands for almost a decade. After a couple of sleepless nights and way too many lists with pros and cons, I decided I would go to US. Within 3 months, I got married, I quit my job, and I packed my whole life and my hopes. I went from girlfriend to wife, from a busy career to unemployed, from being surrounded by friends to not knowing anyone in my new country. Crazy what love can do to your brain, isn't it? Jet lagged, but still excited, I started 2020 in my new adoptive city, Bellevue. According to my visa status, I was an alien, but I did not feel like one in the beginning because I quickly stumbled upon Bellevue Library. At first, I thought I was going there for the books. The librarian smiled every time I would check out 10 books at a time. Soon, I realized I was going there for the people because the library became my second home. Every morning when my husband would go to his job, I would dress up and go to my job at the library. Hidden behind my books, I was a spy, trying to get a glimpse of the community around me. I don't think those people knew, but they were my companions. And soon enough, I started baptizing them. There was Nelson, tall, dark-skinned, gray hair with trousers generous at the waist, always snoring next to the window, probably coming to the library after a long night on the streets. Then there was Meg, with whom I had built handmade decorations at the workshop. There was Gary, always studying for an exam and chewing his fingernails. And there was Karen, the lovely pensioner I wanted to be like when I grew old. Every day I would come home after a day of work at the library and share my updates on Nelson, Meg, Gary, and Karen with my husband. The library became a sacred space for me where I experienced awe, longing, homesickness, loneliness, and connection at the same time. And I felt cocooned in this community. And then, all of a sudden, the global pandemic hit and the library closed. Being at home started well, finally some more quality time with my husband. However, the days expanded and the time alone turned to loneliness. I remember vividly lying on the back on my living room floor, staring at the ceiling. And I felt confused, I felt lonely, anxious in this unpredictable world. The loss of my previous life was starting to sink in. The gap between my hopes when I left and the reality also started to sink in. I had dreamt of a journey of personal transformation, creative energy, fascinating people. And the reality was that I was sitting in my living room in my yoga pants and the whole world was suffering. However, I was not going to let this pandemic get away without a fight. And I journaled, I cried, I journaled again. I twisted my body in every possible yoga pose. I hiked and I networked. Anything to cut through that uncertainty. And then I came across We Are Pistachio, a community of spouses that relocated just like me. I started listening to their podcast. I heard a kind and energizing voice talking with hope about her own struggles with relocation. In that moment, I felt a bit less alone in feeling lonely. This was a woman I deeply admired who had made a career out of volunteering. Volunteer for causes dear to your heart, she said. I acted upon this advice, and within a month, I was volunteering for 3 organizations for causes dear to my heart. Mentoring entrepreneurs, helping relocating spouses just like me, and supporting STEM education for girls. You see, volunteering was my path to the community, a path of active belonging. So where am I now? Still in love, if you're wondering, and still on a roller coaster, but I'm embracing with more curiosity the changes in my life, be them lows or highs, as now I'm more equipped with more patience, resilience, and a sense of connection with myself and others. But let's go back to the story of the ugly duckling. Aditi, how did you find that connection with yourself?
Thanks, Anka. When I came to the US in 2015 to follow my husband's job, I felt like the ugly duckling. Until my father's voice reminded me that I didn't need to fit in. I just needed to be me. When I found belonging within myself, I was able to create belonging for others. Out of this pain and joy, We Are Pistachio was born. We represent the stories of millions of relocating spouses around the world and in our community. The joy and pain of relocation is the common thread that binds these stories. What's also common is while this pain was paralyzing, we made a conscious choice. We chose to give back to the community. We chose to be happy, embrace our global mindset, be tough to navigate the challenges, be open to everything life threw at us, and stayed nutty, just like a pistachio. I'm Aditi, the founder and chief relocating spouse of We Are Pistachio, a community built by relocating spouses for each other. We are on a mission to unlock the personal, professional, and economic potential of every relocating spouse. Our vision: no relocating spouse is ever alone. We built this community as newcomers to the area and chose to volunteer and assimilate in the community. However, standing here today, I can't help but wonder, what would it be like if every new relocating spouse was embraced into this community, their talents recognized, and their friendships multiplied? What if we went beyond saying hello and invited them for coffee, dinner, and conversations? What if no one ever had to lie in their living room with loneliness like Anka, or feel like the ugly duckling as I did? What if the burden of assimilating in the community was equally shared by the newcomers and the seasoned community members? There has never been a more important time for inclusion and belonging. We stand here with a powerful call to action. As you step out of this virtual room, what is one thing which you will do today to lighten the burden of someone who is relocating and fill their hearts with the joy of belonging? Not sure yet? We have a few ideas. Join us in our movement. Amplify our voice, send a relocating spouse our way, or come and share your expertise with us. All you have to do is take the first step. Thank you and good night.
Wow. Hello, everybody. Thank you so much, Debbie, and all of the storytellers. We are so moved by what you have shared with us today. Arthur, Emily, Aditi, Narcissa, Anka, giving us a slice of what it's like to live in this community, to work in this community, to visit Bellevue. And how can we be better? How can we do better to welcome people that are arriving? How can we look beyond the mask and begin to step into other people's stories? How can we welcome them into this community and build relationships? So I want to thank you all for sharing your brave, courageous stories. I'm so moved every time I hear them. And I hope the rest of the community has felt that way too. So they'll have a moment in a few to be able to reflect on those 3 different stories that were shared. And I just want to thank you. And Debbie, thank you for bringing out the voices of so many people that have been able to share through cultural conversations and have us get to know them better. Thank you, Debbie.